The world that breathes beneath the world. There are two kinds of people who walk into the black pine forest after midnight. The first kind are the fools, the curious, the desperate, the drunk, who wander off the paved road because they saw something flicker between the trees, something silver and fast and impossible, and they think, I must know what that was. These people rarely come back the same. Some come back trembling. Some come back changed in ways they can never explain to anyone who wasn't there. And some, a rare, chosen few, do not come back as the people they were at all. The second kind are the ones who live there. This story belongs to both. What follows is not a fairy tale, though it contains moments so beautiful they will make your chest ache. It is not a horror story, though there is blood and loss and the kind of grief that sits on your sternum like a stone for years. It is not a love story, not only, though by the time you reach the final page, you will understand that love, in its truest form, is not a feeling at all. It is a decision, made every day, in the dark, with no guarantee of morning. This is a story about a woman named Sarah Okafor, who's 31 years old and who believes with absolute certainty that she has already lived the best years of her life. She is wrong, but she doesn't know that yet. This is also a story about a man named Davin Ashvale, who is the alpha of the oldest werewolf pack in North America and who has not allowed himself to feel anything deeply in 7 years. He is wrong about that too, about the not feeling. But the walls he has built are so thick, he can no longer hear his own heartbeat echo off them. And this is a story about what happens when two people who have given up on themselves are forced, by fate, by fury, by a moon that does not care about human plans, to look directly at each other. But more than any of that, this is a story about a truth that cuts deeper than silver. The life you have is borrowed. Every breath is on loan. Every morning is a mercy. And the people we love, the ones who make this borrowed life feel like it was made for us, are not ours to keep. They are ours only to cherish right now in this exact moment, before the next one comes and changes everything. So read slowly, feel every word. Because the story you are holding is not just about wolves and moonlight and the electricity between two strangers in a forest at 3 a.m. It is about you. It is about every person you have been too afraid to hold. Every apology you swallowed instead of speaking. Every morning you walked past a mirror and didn't recognize the person looking back. It is about the terrifying, irreplaceable gift of being alive. Now, let us begin. Sarah Okafor arrived in Black Pine, Montana with one duffel bag, a broken phone screen, and the specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. She had driven 14 hours from Chicago without stopping, except twice. Once for gas, and once because she pulled over on the shoulder of I-90 somewhere in South Dakota and sat with her hands on the steering wheel and her forehead pressed against it. Not crying, not quite, just breathing into the leather and reminding herself that she was still here. That her body was still doing the involuntary, miraculous thing of continuing to exist, even when her mind had given it no particular reason to. She was still here. She repeated that until it became a rhythm instead of a question. The thing about losing everything in the span of 11 months is that it stops feeling dramatic after a while. Drama requires witnesses. Sarah's collapse had been entirely private. A slow unwinding in an apartment that smelled like her old life, surrounded by objects that used to mean something. The framed photo of her mother, Adaise, who had died in February. The coffee mug she and her ex-fiancé Marcus had bought in Portugal, the year they still believed in their future. The journal she had stopped writing in the day her doctor said words like significant and irreversible in quality of life in the same breath, referring to the nerve damage in her right hand that ended her career as a concert pianist before she turned 30. Piano had been everything. Then it was nothing. Then her mother was gone. Then Marcus was gone. Not cruel about it, just honest in a way that was somehow worse. His voice gentle and sad when he said he didn't know how to be with someone who had stopped believing in tomorrow. And then Sarah was in an apartment alone at 3 a.m, staring at sheet music she could no longer play, in a city that felt like it had been built specifically to remind her of who she used to be. So she left. The cabin in Blackpine belonged to her mother's oldest friend, Aunt Cece. Not a real aunt, but the kind of woman who shows up when things fall apart and asks no questions and presses a key into your palm and says, "Go, child. Go and breathe some different air." The cabin sat on the eastern edge of the Blackpine forest, 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, with a wood stove and a porch and a view of the Absaroka Range that made you feel, for one suspended moment every morning, that the world was not ruined after all. Sarah pulled into the gravel drive just after 10 p.m., the headlights sweeping across pine trunks that seemed to lean inward, curious. She sat in the car for a long moment after she cut the engine. The silence outside was not the silence of the city, not the absence of sound, not the white noise of traffic held at a distance. This was a living silence, a breathing one, as if the forest was awake and aware and simply choosing for now to say nothing. She got out of the car. The cold hit her like a clean, flat palm, sharp, honest, bracing. She gasped, and for the first time in weeks, the gasp was not fear. It was just her lungs responding to something real. She looked up. The moon was 3 days from full. It hung over the peaks like a lantern someone had left burning, heavy and amber and absolutely indifferent to her grief. And yet she stood there, neck craned, staring up at it for a long time because there was something in its refusal to acknowledge her suffering that felt, paradoxically, like comfort. The moon did not pity her. The moon did not care. The moon was simply there, doing its ancient, faithful work of illuminating the dark. She could learn from that. The cabin was smaller than she remembered from the one visit she had made as a girl. 12 years old, summer, when everything still felt like it was opening rather than closing. But it was clean. Aunt Cece had sent someone to air it out and stock the pantry. There was firewood stacked by the stove, and a note on the kitchen table in Cece's round, looping handwriting. "Baby, you are not broken. You are between. There is a difference. The fireplace takes a little patience to start. Don't rush it. Love you to the marrow." Sarah folded the note and put it in her pocket. She did not cry. She was tired of crying. She built the fire instead. She was almost asleep on the couch, still in her coat, the fire popping softly when she heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like a pressure, a shift in the quality of the silence outside, as if the breathing forest had held its breath. Then, distant but unmistakable. A howl, long, low, and carrying in it something she had no word for. Something that moved through her sternum and sat at the base of her throat and would not let her breathe for 3 full seconds. Then another. Then a chorus, overlapping, layered, speaking to each other in a language that had no translation, but somehow needed none. Sarah sat up. She was from Chicago. She knew intellectually that wolves existed in Montana. She had read it in the listing description, even wildlife present, observe from a distance, do not approach. She had thought, Fine. She had thought, I'll be careful. She had not thought it would sound like that. Like grief and joy braided into one long note and released into the cold night air. Like something that lived in her blood was recognizing something it had always known. She pressed her hand to the glass of the window and looked out into the dark. Something looked back. 2 eyes, gold as firelight, low to the ground, and then she blinked, gone. Just the dark, just the trees, just the amber moon. Sarah stood at the window for a long time before she went to bed. She did not sleep well. But when she did sleep, she dreamed of running, not from something, not towards something, just running with her whole body, with a kind of fierce and careless joy she'd not felt since she was a child, who didn't yet know the world was capable of loss. In the morning, she woke up and felt, for the first time in months, like she wanted to see what the day held. It was a small thing, but it was a beginning.
Chapter 2. Devon Ashvale had not been called by his first name in 7 years. To the members of the Ashvale pack, 43 wolves ranging from infants to elders, spread across 200 acres of black pine forest and the surrounding valley, he was Alpha. To the human residents of Black Pine Town, he was Mr. Ashvale, who owned the timber company that employed 1/3 of the county and who attended town council meetings in a quiet, methodical way and said little and decided much. To the clerks at the hardware store and the woman at the post office, he was the tall man with the gray-streaked hair and the eyes that made you feel briefly and inexplicably like you had forgotten what you were going to say. His mother, before she passed, had called him Dav. No one else did. He had allowed the name to go unused for so long that it felt, when he thought it, like a room he had locked and stopped visiting. He was 40 years old. He had been Alpha since 33, when his father, the great Ossian Ashvale, was killed not by an enemy or a rival, but by a simple and democratically indifferent stroke of fate. A blood clot, the doctor said, probably instantaneous. He wouldn't have felt it. As if painlessness was the metric by which a death should be judged. As if the absence of pain in the dying made the absence of the person easier for the living to carry. It did not. Devon had carried it the way he carried everything, inward, silently, with the specific discipline of a man who has learned that falling apart is not an option when 43 people are watching you to decide how afraid they should be. He had been a different person before, laughing, restless, the kind of man who ran through the forest at midnight purely for the joy of it, who brought home injured birds and nursed them back, who had once driven 4 hours in a snowstorm to see a performance by a Chicago pianist whose music, someone had told him, was unlike anything living. He remembered sitting in that concert hall, the first 2 rows full of wolves, scattered in human form, wearing their best clothes, and he remembered the woman at the piano, young, fierce, with hands that seemed to pull something out of the air and transform it into feeling. He had not been able to stop watching her hands. He had not gone back to Chicago. He had not sought her out. He was the son of an Alpha with responsibilities so deep they had roots. But he had thought about those hands for a long time afterward. And then his father died. And then the grief. And then the weight of leadership. And then, slowly, the laughter fading like a radio signal moving out of range. And then silence. And then routine. And then 7 years of holding everything together so perfectly that he had forgotten there was a difference between holding things together and being alive. He knew something had shifted in the forest 2 nights before the woman arrived, though he didn't know yet that she was coming. The pack felt it, that particular atmospheric change, the way the air in the eastern reach of the territory had begun to carry something new. He sent his beta, a wiry, sharp-eyed woman named Zola Marin, to check the borders. "There is a car," she reported, "human, female, from the smell of it, staying at the Olu cabin. She is not a threat." "You're sure?" "She had a piano sticker on her bumper, and she burned her dinner." "She is not exactly hunting us, Devon." He noticed that she used his name instead of his title. Zola was the only one who still did that sometimes, a small act of insurgence that he had long since stopped correcting, because somewhere under the walls he had built, he suspected he needed it. "Keep a watch on her, gentle. Don't let her see anyone." "Too late for that," Zola said, with the carefully neutral expression she used when she knew something he didn't. "Caius went too close last night." She saw his eyes through the window. Davon was quiet for a moment. Caius was 8 years old and constitutionally incapable of following instructions that conflicted with his curiosity. "Is she frightened?" Zola considered this. "No," she said finally. She pressed her hand against the glass, like she was saying hello. Davon said nothing. He turned and looked out through the trees toward the eastern edge of the territory, where the cabin sat. The morning was cold and clear, frost on every needle. He did not know yet why his chest had done that thing, that sudden compressed thing, like a fist had closed briefly around his heart and then released, when Zola described the woman pressing her hand to the glass. He told himself it was nothing. He was wrong about that too. That morning, without fully understanding why, he ran the eastern border himself, not in wolf form, in human form, on foot, through the pale gold morning light that filtered through the pines like something holy. He told himself he was inspecting the territory, checking the fences that marked the unofficial boundary between pack land and the human easements. He was not checking the fences. He stopped at a point in the tree line where he could see the cabin porch without being visible from it. A woman sat on the steps with a mug of coffee, both hands wrapped around it, face tipped up to the sky. She was wearing an oversized sweater and boots that were not quite adequate for Montana mornings, and her natural hair was loose and only partially pulled back, and there was something in the way she sat, the careful, deliberate stillness of a person who is actively trying to remember how to exist. That made something in Devon's chest do the fist and release thing again. He recognized it this time. He had not felt it in years, which was why it took him a moment. But he recognized it. It was a tension. The helpless, involuntary kind. The kind your body gives before your brain has a vote. He turned and walked back into the forest before she could turn her head. He did not run, but his pace was faster than it needed to be. Behind him, invisible, Zola watched him go and allowed herself the smallest possible smile.
Chapter 3. The town of Black Pine, Montana had a population of 2,340 people, according to the last census, which was technically accurate if you counted only the human residents and didn't look too carefully at the various cabins and homesteads in the surrounding forest, where the definition of people became, in the evenings especially, a matter of perspective. Sarah discovered the town on her 3rd day, when she ran out of coffee and couldn't find a filter for the ancient percolator and drove in on a road that turned from gravel to asphalt somewhere around mile 2. The mountains enormous and indifferent behind every rooftop. Black Pine was the kind of small town that looked like it had been arranged by someone who genuinely loved the concept of community. A main street with actual storefronts, a diner with steamed-up windows, a hardware store, a library the size of a generous living room, a church with a message board out front that currently read, "You are loved even when you cannot feel it." She read that one twice. The grocery store was called ARIANN'S, which she thought was a family name. The woman behind the counter was lean and sharp-featured with watchful dark eyes and hair cut close to her head, and she had the kind of presence that took up more space than her physical body. The specific quality of a person who is always, no matter how casually they appear to be standing, completely aware of everything happening in the room. "You must be the woman in the Olu cabin," the woman said, before Sarah had said a word. "Is it that obvious? New face, out-of-state plates, buying enough groceries for a week but not a month, so you're not sure yet if you are staying?" The woman held out her hand. "Zola Marin, this is my store." Sarah shook it. "Sarah Okafor, Cece's girl." "Not exactly, her friend's daughter. I spent one summer here when I was 12. "I know," Zola said, with the kind of quiet confidence that Sarah was beginning to associate with everyone in this town. "How long are you staying?" "I don't know." Zola nodded as if this was exactly the right answer. "Then I'll show you where the good coffee is." The good coffee was at a place called The Sill, which was half cafe and half plant nursery, run by a gentle giant of a man named Percival Osu, who spoke softly and moved slowly and made cortados that Sarah was pretty sure contained some trace element not listed on the menu, because the first sip made her feel, briefly and genuinely, like everything might be okay. "What's in this?" she said, not really asking. "Coffee," Percy said, which was simultaneously unhelpful and somehow the perfect answer. She sat at the window table with Zola Marin and looked out at the main street and felt something she had forgotten how to feel, present, specifically, precisely present, not in Chicago, not in the past, not in the future, here, in this chair, with this coffee, with the mountains framed by the window like a painting someone had hung just for her. "What brought you to Black Pine?" Zola asked. Sarah considered lying. She was good at deflecting. Had been for years, had spent months saying, "I'm fine, I'm handling it, I'm taking some time," the way people do when the truth is too large to hand to a stranger in a manageable shape. But there was something about Zola Marin's gaze, direct, uncritical, as if she had already decided Sarah's truth was acceptable and was simply waiting for her to arrive at it. That made deflection feel like more effort than honesty. "Everything fell apart," Sarah said, in a fairly complete way. "My career, my engagement, my mother." "In what order?" "Career first, then Mom, then Marcus, which honestly I understand. You can't ask someone to wait for a version of you that might not come back." Zola was quiet for a moment. What was the career? "Concert pianist." Sarah held up her right hand. The nerve damage was invisible mostly. No scar, no obvious deformity. Just a hand that didn't do what she told it to anymore. "I can still play, just not at the level I had. Not at the level that was the whole reason I spent 20 years doing nothing else. And without the level, it stopped being worth doing?" The question landed differently than she expected. Not accusatory, genuinely curious. And the answer, when she looked at it honestly, embarrassed her a little. "I think I told myself that." "Yeah. Zola drank her coffee. My cousin lost his voice. He was a singer. Car accident, some nerve damage in his throat. He can still speak, he can still hum. For 2 years he didn't sing at all. Then one day he was washing dishes and a song just came out of him. Half the range he used to have, rougher, different. He cried for about 20 minutes. Then he kept going. She set down her cup. He says the new voice is the real one. The old one was just the preview. Sarah did not know what to do with this information, which meant it was probably important. That's very wise, she said carefully. He also drives me insane and still owes me $60 from 2019, so let's not make him a saint. Sarah laughed. It surprised her, the realness of it, the way it came from somewhere deep and unhesitant. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like that. Zola watched her with quiet satisfaction, the way a person watches something they have been trying to coax back to life. She did not mention, because it was not yet the moment, that the man Sarah had not quite seen through her window on that first night, the one with the gold eyes and the very specific effect on her nervous system, was her alpha. Nor that he had run the eastern border that morning in human form, which he never did, and had returned in a state of barely visible agitation that Zola recognized from approximately 0 times in the last 7 years. She would not mention these things today, but she would watch because watching was what she did, and because she had a feeling, the bone-deep, infallible kind, that this borrowed, accidental woman had just walked into the territory and rearranged something that had been stuck for a very long time. Chapter 4. It was day 6. She'd developed a routine, the specific, fragile routine of a person who has survived chaos, and is now rebuilding some basic architecture of days, morning coffee on the porch, regardless of temperature. Walk into the forest on the marked trail 40 minutes to the creek and back. Lunch. Afternoons, she'd started to fill with something she hadn't planned. She'd found an old upright piano in the cabin's back room, dusty, slightly out of tune, but functional. She played with her left hand mostly, and sometimes both, accepting the imprecision of the right, learning to work around it rather than against it. The sound was different, smaller, rougher. But there was something in it that felt, she wouldn't have said honest to anyone else, but to herself, in the back room alone, she could admit it. It felt like the most honest playing she had ever done. She was on the trail when the rain started. Not a gentle rain, a Montana autumn rain which arrived suddenly and without negotiation, and she was a mile from the cabin with no hood and a thin jacket when the sky simply opened. She ran. She took a wrong turn somewhere. The trees all looked the same in the rain, the trail markers invisible in the gray. And she was soaked and slightly panicking, turning in circles, when she walked into something solid. Not something. Someone. Her face connected with a chest that was broad and firm and smelled of pine and cold air, and 2 hands caught her arms before she fell. She looked up. He was tall, several inches over 6 feet, with dark skin a shade deeper than hers, and jaw-length locks threaded with gray, and a face that was not handsome in any conventional arranged way, but was striking in a way that took a moment to fully arrive at you. The high cheekbones, the long straight nose, the mouth held in a careful line, and the eyes she recognized. Gold, not hazel, not amber. Gold, like something with its own light source. She had seen those eyes at the cabin window. You, she said, which was not what she planned to say. He went very still. The kind of still that is not the absence of movement, but the active, deliberate management of it. As if many things wanted to happen in his body simultaneously, and he was preventing them all through sustained effort. "You're off the trail," he said. His voice was low, measured, and did something specific and unhelpful to her nervous system. "I noticed that." "The cabin is that way." He tilted his head slightly in a direction that all looked equally tree-lined to her. "I know the cabin is that way," she said, with more confidence than she felt. The rain came suddenly." He did not let go of her arms immediately. She did not, she realized, want him to. This was inconvenient information, noted and set aside for later examination. "I'm Sarah," she said. A pause, long enough to be interesting. "Davin, do you live out here?" "Yes." "In the forest." "In the forest?" She looked at him, really looked, the way she had stopped allowing herself to look at people since everything fell apart, because looking meant noticing, and noticing meant caring, and caring meant exposure. He was drenched, she realized, standing in the rain without any apparent interest in not standing in the rain. There was a quality to him that reminded her, strangely, abstractly, of the mountains, the way they just were, solid and permanent and ancient and entirely uninterested in whether you found them convenient. "You're not going to ask me what I'm doing out here alone in the rain," she said. "No." "Why not?" "Because it's not my business unless you want it to be." This was, she thought, possibly the most respectful thing any man had said to her in years. She felt the ground shift slightly under her feet, which she attributed to the mud and not to anything else. "You're getting soaked," she said. "So are you." He finally released her arms. The absence of his hands felt abrupt, like a sentence that had stopped mid-word. "I'll walk you back." She wanted to say she didn't need walking back. She was a grown woman. She had navigated Chicago public transit at 2 a.m. and written her graduate thesis in 3 weeks and performed Rachmaninoff from memory in front of 1,200 people. She could find a cabin in the rain, but she also did not actually know which direction the cabin was. And the rain was very cold, and his presence beside her was strange, settling, like barometric pressure returning to normal after a storm. "Okay," she said. They walked in silence. He knew every route, every turn, every place where the trail dipped and puddled, and he walked 2 steps ahead and 1 step to the side, which she realized was exactly the angle needed for his body to break the worst of the wind without making it obvious that this was what he was doing. She noticed that about him. The care that was built into every movement, or structured to look like nothing special. The attention that asked for no acknowledgement. The cabin appeared through the trees. She climbed the porch steps and turned back to him, standing at the edge of the tree line. The rain came down between them like a curtain. "Thank you," she said. "Stay on the marked trail," he said. Not unkind, just honest. "Is that a warning?" Something moved in his expression, there and gone so fast she couldn't name it. "It's a suggestion. The forest is bigger than it looks." "Most things are," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Just looked the way he had not looked at anyone in years. Directly, without the practiced distance. With something in the gold eyes that was not guarded for 1 unguarded second. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. Within 10 steps, the forest had absorbed him completely, as if he'd never been there at all. Sarah stood on the porch with rain dripping from her hair and her heart doing something quiet and insistent that she did not have words for yet. She went inside. She sat down at the piano. She played for 2 hours, both hands. Chapter 5. Zola appeared at the cabin door the next morning with a pot of groundnut soup that smelled so precisely of every kitchen Sarah's mother had ever cooked in that she stood in the doorway for a moment, unable to speak. "I know," Zola said quietly, not explaining how she knew. "Let me in." They ate at the small kitchen table, and Sarah told her about her mother, not the parts she had told other people, the managed version with the appropriate distances built in, but the real parts. The way Aday's Okafor had sung while she cooked, and off-key was an understatement, but the sincerity was absolute. The way she had never once, not once, suggested that Sarah's ambition was too large or her dreams too far. The way she had sat in that front row at every performance, the same woman in the audience every time. And how losing her felt like losing the only audience that had ever truly counted. She knew you, Zola said. She was the only one. That's not true, Zola said. But I understand why it feels that way right now. Sarah looked at her. How do you just say things like that? Without softening them? Because softened things don't reach, Zola said simply. They land on the outside of people. I'd rather land on the inside, Sarah asked because she had been trying not to and failing. How long has Davin Ashvale lived in the forest? A pause, long and careful. His father died 7 years ago. He became responsible for a great many people very suddenly, and there was a grief on top of the grief, something he lost that was more personal. Zola turned her coffee cup between her palms. He doesn't laugh anymore. He used to have this laugh, loud, ridiculous, completely out of proportion to whatever was funny. Half the town would start laughing just hearing it. That stopped. She set the cup down. I miss it. We all do. But he doesn't know that because he's too busy holding everything together to notice what he's lost of himself. Sarah was quiet for a moment. She knew something about that. The things we lose of ourselves without noticing, she said. Yes. I used to believe every day mattered. I used to really physically believe it. I'd wake up and feel the value of the day before it had even started. I don't know when that stopped. Somewhere between the diagnosis and the funeral, I think I just started getting through days instead of living them. Zola nodded slowly. My grandmother used to say, a day is not owed to you, it is given. And what you do with what you're given, that is the only thing that is truly yours. The words moved through Sarah like a current. She felt them in her hands, the right one especially, the damaged one. The one she had spent the better part of a year treating as a wound rather than a hand. I need to find a piano tuner, she said, which seemed like a non sequitur, but wasn't. She ran into Devon at the hardware store that afternoon. Not ran into. He was there deliberately, she would understand later, because Zola had sent him a text that said simply, hardware store, 3 p.m., and he had gone without asking why, which was either the behavior of a man who trusted his beta absolutely, or the behavior of a man who was looking for a reason to be somewhere without having to admit he was looking for it. The gap at the bottom, she explained when she turned from the rack and found him standing 2 feet away, looking at her with the specific expression of a man who is trying to look like he's not looking. Every time the wind picks up, it sounds like there's someone breathing under the door. I can fix that, he said. I have the weather stripping. I know how to install it. The cabin doors are old, the frame is slightly off. You need to cut it at an angle or it won't seal. She looked at him. He looked at the weather stripping as if it were a matter of great professional interest. Are you offering to fix my door? She said. Yes. Why? A pause. Because the forest gets cold at night and a door that doesn't seal is inefficient. That is a very practical reason. I'm a practical person. He fixed the door that evening. He had brought his own tools, which told her the offer had been premeditated, and he worked quietly and precisely and declined the offer of coffee twice before accepting it the third time. They drank it on the porch as the sun went behind the mountains and the temperature dropped and the first stars appeared with the efficiency of things that have been doing this every single night for billions of years and intend to keep doing it with or without an audience. Do you ever, she started. Do I ever what? Just, do you ever stop, stand here and just stop? She gestured at the sky, the mountains, the forest, pressing close and the last of the light. This place does something to me. I've been in cities my whole life, and I keep looking at this and thinking, how did I not know? He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I used to. Stand here and stop. A pause. I don't remember the last time. Why not? A longer pause, the kind that contains something trying to get out. I got busy holding things together, he said finally, quietly, like a confession made to the dark rather than to her. The stars came out above the mountains, one by one, doing their ancient, faithful work. They sat on the porch until it was fully dark and cold, and neither of them mentioned leaving. And the silence between them was the comfortable kind, the kind that means two people have found, without planning to, that each other's company is easier than being alone.
The Sandira Chapter 6. Sarah knew it was coming. She had been in Black Pine long enough to learn to read the sky's preparations, the way the evenings got brighter before it, the way the air took on a particular quality of anticipation, as if the whole landscape was leaning towards something. She had also noticed something she didn't know how to explain. In the days leading up to the full moon, the forest grew louder, not with ordinary night sounds, with something else. Restless, alive, as if the animals and the trees and the dark itself were building toward a frequency she could feel in her teeth. She had been eyeing Black Pine for 2 weeks. She had had coffee with Zola 4 times. She had had her door fixed, and 2 evenings on the porch with a man whose company she had begun to depend on in a way she was trying not to examine too carefully. She had played the out-of-tune upright piano every single day. She had started sleeping through the night. And she had not felt, not once, the deep gray flatness that had made her apartment in Chicago feel like a room she was serving time in rather than living in. She did not know yet what she was building back toward. She only knew she was building. The night of the full moon, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the bed and listened to the forest and felt the pull of something she couldn't name. A low-frequency call, like a bass line playing just below the threshold of hearing, something older than language, asking something she couldn't translate. She got up at midnight. She put on her coat and boots and went out onto the porch. The moon was extraordinary. It sat above the mountains like a second sun, vast, white, indifferent, magnificent, casting shadows sharp as midday over the snow-dusted peaks and the dark forest and the meadow at the foot of the property. Everything was silver and black and achingly clear. The cold was absolute, and the sounds. The howling began at the tree line and radiated outward like rings in water, overlapping, answering, a language made of feeling rather than words. She stood on the porch and listened and felt her own heartbeat calibrate to something outside itself, the way a tuning fork responds to the note it was made for. She walked off the porch. She knew she should not. She knew the trail, the marked trail, the keep to the marked trail. But the meadow was not the forest, and the night was extraordinary, and she was tired of staying within safe borders. She had spent years staying within safe borders, and she was still broken. Maybe the borders weren't keeping her safe. Maybe they were just keeping her small. She walked to the center of the meadow and stood in the full cold light of the moon and tilted her face to it and spread her arms, feeling slightly ridiculous and not caring, and let the cold air move through her and the howling surround her, and the moonlight do whatever it was doing to her skin, which was something. She could feel it, a warmth that had no heat source, a recognition in her cells that her conscious mind had no framework for. She heard footsteps behind her, human footsteps. She turned. Devon stood at the meadow's edge, in human form, barefoot, on the frost-stiff grass. He was wearing dark clothes, and his expression was fractured. That was the only word she had for it. The controlled surface had cracked, and underneath was something enormous and unmanaged, and he was looking at her with gold eyes that were fully, entirely luminous, lit from within by something that was not human physiology, and that she should have been afraid of, and was not. "You shouldn't be out here," he said. His voice was different, rougher, like something had sanded off the careful polish of it. "I know," she said. She did not move. He crossed the meadow toward her, and she noticed his walk had changed. Something in the gait, the way his weight moved, as if another way of moving was pressing through the human one, like water through thin fabric. He stopped 3 feet from her. The moonlight made the gray in his hair silver. "I need you to go inside," he said. "Are you in danger?" A sound came out of him that was not a laugh. "No." "Am I in danger?" "Not from me, never from me," said with a certainty that landed like a weight. "Then why do I need to go inside?" "Because—" He stopped. His jaw was tight, the muscles working. "Because it's easier to be what I am without an audience. Without—" He stopped again. "Without what?" she asked softly. He looked at her. The gold eyes were completely open. "Without you." The word sat between them in the cold air. A small word that meant a very large thing. She should have been frightened. She had known this man for 2 weeks. She did not know what he was, not exactly, not the whole of it. But she could see it gathering in him right now. The shift, the other nature pressing at the seams of the human form. And she was standing in a midnight meadow in the full light of the moon, and she was not frightened at all. "I've been hiding for a year," she said. "I'm tired of it." "Sarah, I'm not afraid of what you are." She took 1 step toward him. "I think I might be more afraid of being safe." Something gave way in him, not the shift. He held that back, iron-willed, because even now, even fractured, his first instinct was protection. But the expression, the walls, the careful 7-year maintained fortress of distance and control, it came apart quietly and completely, like ice in spring. No drama, just a change of state. He put his hand against her face. One hand, large and warm and very gently placed, thumb against her cheekbone, and looked at her the way she had not been looked at in so long she had forgotten the shape of it, like she was real, like she was here. Like this moment, exactly this moment, not the past, not the future, just this cold, bright meadow, and this inexplicable woman, and this moon above them both, completely indifferent and completely necessary, was everything. "I don't know what this is," he said. "Neither do I," she said, "but I'm still here." Above them, the moon poured its borrowed light over the mountains, and the forest sang, and 2 people stood in a meadow and chose, against every reasonable instinct, to stay. A long pause, the longest she had seen him need. "Because I learned to associate letting go with losing control," he said finally. "My father died, and I became responsible for 43 lives, and I decided that the way to not fail them was to hold everything so tightly it couldn't slip, including the wolf." He looked at his hands, large, steady hands, folded around his coffee cup. "I think I forgot that containing isn't the same as managing. I think I forgot a lot of things. What kind of things? How to want something for myself," said quietly, almost inaudibly, like the words had to be released slowly to avoid breaking something. She understood that the way you understand something you have been living inside for so long, you stopped being able to name it. The way your own reflection startles you sometimes, not because it's strange, because it's yours. I stopped playing piano for 8 months, she said. After the diagnosis. Not because I couldn't. Because I had decided that if I couldn't play perfectly, playing meant nothing. She looked out at the forest. My mother would have been so angry with me. She didn't raise me to love music only when it was easy. What made you start again? The piano in the back room. She smiled slightly. I kept walking past it, and eventually my hands walked in without me. Your hands were smarter than your head. My hands always were. My head is catastrophically overcautious. I want to show you something, he said, if you're willing. He shifted in the clearing behind the cabin, where the trees were close and the morning light came through in pieces. She stood at the edge and watched. It was not violent. It was not the thrashing horror movie transformation of the stories. It was fluid, seamless. There and then the man becoming the wolf between one breath and the next, a great gray-black animal with gold eyes, who stood in the morning light and looked at her with the same quality of attention the man had, patient, direct, unhurried, and who then came to her slowly, head low, and pressed his nose against her outstretched hand. She exhaled. She had not realized she was holding her breath. "Hello," she said, to him, to the wolf, to whoever was looking at her with those steady gold eyes. The wolf's tail moved, not a wag, just once, a deliberate acknowledgement, and she felt the absurd, overwhelming urge to cry. Not out of fear or grief. Out of something she had been missing for so long she had forgotten the name of it. Wonder. Pure, childlike wonder. The sense that the world was larger and stranger and more alive than she had let herself believe. She pressed her palm flat against the wolf's broad head, feeling the warmth of him, the steady breathing, the absolutely ordinary miracle of another living creature choosing to be close to her. "Thank you," she said, and she wasn't sure if she was talking to Devon, or to the morning, or to some larger, unnamed thing that had led her out of Chicago and into this impossible clearing. Maybe all three. Chapter 7. He told her in the morning, when they were both back on the cabin porch with coffee, the moon gone and the ordinary gray dawn replacing the silver extraordinary of the night before. He told her the way he told the truth about everything, with the minimum number of words necessary and none of the softening she had learned most people applied to things that were difficult to say. He told her, "I am a werewolf. I shift at the full moon, and sometimes voluntarily. I have been Alpha, the leader of my pack, for 7 years. There are 43 of us. The forest is our territory. Zola is my beta. The boy who looked in your window was Caius, who is 8 and has no impulse control. We have lived alongside the human town of Blackpine for 4 generations. We do not harm people. We are not what the stories say." She was quiet for a long time. "The eyes at the window," she said finally. "Caius. He was curious. I apologize for him. The howling. The pack. Full moon communication. Last night. A pause. Yes. Were you going to shift?" "I was, trying not to. When I saw you in the meadow, the pull was significant." He said the word significant with the measured care of a man who is consciously underusing it. "I was managing it. Because of me. Because of you." "What does it feel like?" she asked. "Shifting." He was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, carefully, he said, "Like the truest version of yourself returning. Like everything you carry as a person, the weight of decisions, the accumulation of grief, the masks. All of it falls away. And you are just alive. Completely. only alive. Nothing past it, nothing beyond it. She felt the words move through her like a chord. That sounds, it does. Why do you contain it then, if it feels like that?
Chapter 8. She met the pack on a Sunday. She also met the reason everything nearly ended before it began. She had been inside the longhouse for less than 4 minutes when Caius found her and attached himself to her arm like a small, determined barnacle. "I saw you first," he announced. "I'm aware," she said. "Were you scared when you saw my eyes?" I pressed my hand against the glass. "Does that seem like scared to you?" He considered this with great seriousness. "No," he concluded. "That seems brave." He looked up at her with eyes that were, she now noticed, an unusual shade of amber. "Are you going to stay?" "Caius!" Zola, appearing from nowhere, took him firmly by the collar. "What did we discuss about interrogating guests?" "It's not interrogating. It's asking," he said, which was technically accurate. "Let him ask," Sarah said. She crouched to the boy's level. He had a gap between his front teeth and the specific fearless eyes of a child who has never been given a reason to doubt the safety of the world. She thought, "I hope no one ever gives you one." She thought, "That's what the people around you are doing, isn't it? Holding the world safe so you never have to know." "I don't know yet if I'm staying," she told him honestly, "but I'm here today." "Today counts," Caius said, with the absolute certainty of someone who has not yet learned to be afraid of it being the only thing. Today counts. She would carry those 2 words farther than he could imagine. The dinner was loud and warm and smelled of wood smoke and a dozen different dishes. She was seated between Zola and an elder named Reva, 70 years old, spine like iron, laugh like a rock slide. When she first felt the quality of the room shift, not everyone, she realized, was glad she was there. He was at the far end of the long table. She would have missed him if Reva hadn't followed her gaze and murmured, without lowering her voice at all, "That's Cale Vorn, 34. His father's family came from the northern range before they folded into this pack. He's been angling to be Devon's second for 3 years, Zola's position." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's been staring at you since you walked in, and not in a way that means welcome." Cale Vorn was lean and light-eyed with the kind of stillness that was not calm but coiled, a man holding himself in readiness rather than in rest. Where Davin's stillness felt like something settled, Cale's felt like a spring under pressure. He was watching Sarah the way a person watches a variable they haven't yet solved for. After dinner, Cale Vorn appeared at Devon's shoulder. "She's human," Cale said. Low, controlled, not accusatory. He was too careful for that. Stating a fact in the tone people use when the fact is also a question. "Yes." The eastern cabin sits at the border of the territory. If she's there long enough, she'll know things she'll tell other people. "She won't." "You're certain of that?" A pause, deliberately long enough to make its point. "Based on knowing her for 2 weeks. Devon turned to look at him then. Just looked, without moving, without raising his voice. And there was something in that look that made the nearest conversation in the room quiet by half. An instinctive, cellular response to the particular quality of an alpha's attention when it is no longer managing itself. "I'm certain of my own judgment," Davin said. "Quiet as winter." "Your judgment," Cale said carefully, "has been otherwise occupied." Sarah set down her glass. She was not a wolf. She had no standing here. She understood that absolutely, and did not care. "I'm standing right here," she said. "If you have concerns about me, you can say them to my face. I've been through enough this year that a man I've known for 4 minutes making implications about my trustworthiness doesn't particularly intimidate me." The room went very quiet. Cale studied her for a moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he dipped his chin. not deference, assessment. He was revising whatever estimate he had made of her and arriving at a new number. She could see it happening behind his eyes. "Fair," he said. One word, and then he walked away. Zola, who had appeared from absolutely nowhere, pressed a fresh glass of wine into Sarah's hand. "Good," she said at normal volume in the now silent room. "Now, everyone eat." At the end of the table, Devon was looking at Sarah with the gold eyes fully open and an expression she did not yet have a name for, but which she would come to understand. Over the months that followed was something between gratitude and recognition. The look of a man who has spent 7 years protecting everyone in his radius and has just, for the first time, been protected by someone else. It undid him, quietly. She watched it happen. She thought, "That is the most dangerous thing I have ever done." She thought, "I would do it again."
Chapter 9. 3 days after the dinner, Cale Vaughan came to the eastern border. Sarah heard him before she saw him. Not his footsteps, but the change in the forest's breathing. She was on the porch with her morning coffee when the birds in the nearest tree went silent all at once. That specific collective hush that meant something of consequence was moving through the trees. She stood. "Sarah Okafor," he said. Not a greeting, an identification. "Cale Vaughan," she said back in the same tone. "I'm not here to threaten you," he said. "I want to be honest with you, which I suspect you prefer." "I do. Devon is my alpha. I would give my life for him. That's not a phrase. It's a fact. It's a contractual reality of what I am. What I am is also the reason I have to say this." He looked at her steadily. The light eyes were not cruel. They were, she thought, afraid, though not of her. He has held this pack together on willpower alone for 7 years. The cost of that is visible to anyone willing to look. He has given everything and received nothing back. That is not sustainable. The pack is only now understanding that. "I know," she said. "You're temporary," he said. "Not cruel. Just precise. I don't know that you intend to be. But you're from somewhere else. You have a life somewhere else. When you leave, and I've watched enough humans in enough seasons to say when, not if, what he's allowed himself to feel, he will have to unfeel. And unfeeling things is how he has run himself down to almost nothing. I am asking you, directly, if you're not going to stay, stop now." Sarah was quiet for a long time. The morning was cold and still, and the mountains were doing the thing they did every day, which was existing without apology, without drama, without any concern for what she decided. The coffee had gone cold in her hand. "You're right that I don't know if I'm staying," she said finally. "I came here because everything I had was gone, and I needed somewhere to be while I figured out what was left. That's the truth." Cale said nothing. "But I didn't come here to use someone and leave. I came here to figure out how to be alive again. And somewhere in that process..." She stopped. "I don't know what's happening between us, but it's not nothing. And I'm not in the habit of walking away from things that aren't nothing. That's not the same as staying." "No," she said. "It isn't." Cale looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. A different nod from the one at the dinner. This one was not assessment. It was something closer to respect. "Then be honest with him," he said. "That's all I'm asking. He can handle the truth. What he can't handle is being surprised by it." He turned and walked back into the forest. She found Devon at his workbench in the timber yard late that afternoon. Sleeves rolled, hands covered in sawdust, doing the specific kind of physical work that functions as thinking. He looked up when she came through the gate and went still in the way he went still around her, which she had learned meant he was deciding how much of himself to show. "Cale came to see me," she said. He put down the plane. A pause that contained several things. "I know. I sent him." She stopped. "You sent him." He said what I should have said myself, probably better than I could have. He looked at her with the gold eyes direct and the expression stripped of its usual management. "I need to know if you're leaving, not because I'll ask you to stay. That's not something I'll do. But because I've spent 7 years not letting myself want things that might go away, and you are the first thing in 7 years that I have wanted badly enough to be afraid of losing." The words landed. She crossed the timber yard and stopped in front of him, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. His face was dusty and tired and entirely unguarded, and she thought, here is the man underneath the alpha. Here is the room he locked 7 years ago, and it is full, so full, of all the things he decided were too dangerous to feel. "I'm not going to make you a promise I can't keep," she said. "I don't know what staying looks like yet. I don't know if I can rebuild a life here. I know what I'm walking away from. I don't know yet what I'd be walking toward." "I know," he said, "but I know that I'm not leaving tomorrow or next week, and I know that I want—" She stopped, finding the words. "I want to find out if that's something you can work with." "Yes," he said, without hesitation, without negotiating the terms. She put her hand against his face, the way he had put his hand against hers in the meadow, one hand precise and deliberate, asking permission and offering it at the same time. He leaned into it, the smallest movement, but it undid everything. Riva found out about Cale's visit 3 hours later through channels she refused to explain. She called Zola. "Well," Zola said. "Well, indeed," Riva said. "He told her to be honest with him or stop. She did both." A pause. "You think that's going to hold?" "I think," Riva said, "that she is the first person to walk into this territory in 7 years, who looked at Devon Asheville and saw the man, and not the alpha. I think that is not a small thing." She was quiet for a moment. "I also think Cale Vaughan is going to be insufferable about being right." Zola laughed, the real one, full and short and startled out of her. Riva smiled at her window. Outside, the forest breathed. The mountains stood. The day moved toward its end with the same unhurried faithfulness it had always managed.
Chapter 10. Not all at once. She was not someone who made dramatic, permanent decisions in a single afternoon. She was someone who made small, consistent choices, accumulating forward, and it was the accumulation that mattered. She stayed for November, and then because November in the mountains was a thing she had not known the world contained, she stayed for December. She called Aunt Cece and told her everything, and Cece said only, "I know, baby. I have known since 1987. I just needed you to find it when you were ready." Staying was not uncomplicated. 3 pack elders formally requested an audience with Devon in the 2nd week of November. 2 of them expressed concern, carefully, respectfully, in the measured way of people who respect their alpha and nonetheless feel they must say the thing they feel. An outsider's presence at the border of the territory was a matter of pack security. Her knowing their nature was a risk that had not been sanctioned by the pack as a whole. They were not wrong. Devon acknowledged this and thanked them and then told them clearly and without room for negotiation that his judgment in this matter was his to carry. The 3rd elder, Not Reva, who had already made her position known, said only, "And if it goes wrong?" Davin was quiet for a moment, then, "If it goes wrong, I'll carry that too. That's what the Alpha's position has always meant." He told Sarah about the meeting that evening, sitting on the cabin porch, the mountains purple and cold behind the tree line. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." No pause, no qualification. "I don't want to cost you your people's trust." "You haven't." He turned to look at her. 3 elders raised a concern. It's a fair concern. I gave them an honest answer. That's how this is supposed to work. The pack decides it trusts its alpha's judgment or it doesn't, but the alpha can't lead by polling every decision. A pause. "My father used to say, lead with your whole chest, or don't lead at all. I haven't led with my whole chest in 7 years." She thought about that for a long time, she thought. Here is what it actually costs. Not just the warmth, not just the morning coffee and the hand in the dark, but this. The accountability. The willingness to stand in front of the people who depend on you and say, "I am choosing something for myself, and I am telling you plainly, and I will answer for it." That's not easy. That's not the story the books tell about love, but it's the true version. She played the piano every day. Percy's husband repaired the upright and tuned it, and when the first clean note rang through the cabin, Sarah sat on the bench and put both hands on the keys and played a scale. Just a scale. C major, ascending and descending. And wept. Not for what she'd lost, for what she still had, for the irreducible fact that the music was still in her, altered and smaller and different in shape, but entirely, undeniably present. She began composing, not the kind of composing she had done before, formal, structured, built for concert halls and critical attention, something more private. She wrote pieces that had no names, that were too short to perform, that sounded like the meadow and the mountain and the cold morning coffee and the specific quality of gold that certain eyes had when they caught the firelight. She wrote music the way a person writes in a journal, for the truth of it, not the audience. She thought, "This is the most honest work I have ever made." She thought, "No one may ever hear it." She thought that might be exactly the point. Devon began to laugh again, not the old laugh, not at first. It came back in a different shape, quieter, more considered, but real, the actual involuntary sound emerging from somewhere unharbored. When Caius performed his impression of Zola, when Sarah described driving through South Dakota with her forehead pressed against the wheel, when something small and funny happened in an ordinary moment and he let himself be in it instead of ahead of it. The pack noticed. They had nothing. These were people who understood that some things returned not with fanfare, but with the slow, stubborn persistence of spring. They simply settled collectively like a structure that has been slightly off its foundation for years and has finally, quietly shifted back. Even Cale noticed. He said nothing, not immediately. For 4 days after the elders' meeting, he was present at every pack gathering and absent from every moment that involved her. He sat at the far end of the table. He answered Davin's questions with the same precision he always had and looked at nothing beyond the question. It was not hostility. It was a man in the process of revising something he had been certain of, and doing it privately, the way some people grieve. On the 5th day, he passed Sarah in the timber yard while she was waiting for Devon. He didn't slow down, but as he moved past her, without turning his head, he said it. "The pack is better." That was all. 3 words. He kept walking. She stood in the cold for a long moment after he was gone. She thought, "That's the most expensive compliment I have ever been given." She thought, He counted those days. He made her wait those days on purpose, because he needed to be sure before he spent that sentence. He was not a man who said things he hadn't earned the right to say. She thought she understood now why Devon trusted him. One morning in December, still dark, the frost on every surface making the world a silver replica of itself, Sarah was sitting on the porch with coffee when Devon came out and sat beside her. She thought, here we are, two people who arrived at this moment carrying everything we have lost. Two people who built walls so high we couldn't see over them and then found that the walls were the problem, not the solution. She thought, my mother is dead. My career is different forever. I am 31 years old in a cabin in Montana in love with a werewolf, and I have never, not in the years of performing, not in the years of being the version of myself that critics and audiences admired, I have never felt more like myself than I do right now. She thought if I had died last year in that gray apartment, I would have missed all of this. What are you thinking? Davin said. That we are not promised tomorrow, she said. No. And that I've spent so much of my life behaving as if the important things could be deferred, as if the music could wait, as if the people I loved didn't need to hear it while they were still here. She turned the cup in her hands. My mother never told me what she was proudest of. She showed me. Every time she sat in that front row, every time she cooked something that smelled like she made it specifically for me, every time she picked up the phone on the first ring, she knew how to live in the day she had. Yes. And I learned it wrong. I learned the ambition and forgot the presence. I learned the responsibility and forgot the man. Yeah, we're both relearning. Together, maybe. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth, and they watched the mountains go from black to gray to the first impossible pink of dawn. And the forest breathed around them, and the cold was honest and clean. And somewhere in the trees, Caius was already awake and doing something Zola would later describe with the phrase he absolutely knew better. The day was beginning. It was a gift. It was always a gift. The difference was knowing it. The difference was choosing every morning against every comfortable alternative, against the easier habit of grief and distance and walls. To be in the only moment that has ever actually existed. Here, now. This breath, this light, this impossible, ordinary morning, before the next one comes. There's a moment every morning, if you are still enough to catch it, between the dark and the light, where the world is neither one thing nor the other, where the mountains are just becoming visible and the stars are not quite gone, and the air holds the particular quality of something that has not yet been decided. Sira Okafor had been waiting her whole life to be still enough to feel it. She felt it now. She intended to keep feeling it, every morning in whatever place this life carried her, for however many mornings she was given. Not because she was promised them, because she wasn't. Because the borrowed life is the only life there is, and that is not a tragedy. That is the whole point. And beside her, the man who had forgotten his own laugh was warming his hands on his coffee cup and watching the mountain take its color back from the dark and learning, slowly, imperfectly, at real cost, with real people watching and real stakes on the table, to let himself be in the only place that has ever been real. Here, now, this moment before the next one comes. Live as if every day is your last, not in desperation, but in gratitude, not in recklessness, but in presence. The borrowed life is still a life. Spend it deliberately. Spend it on the people and the moments and the small exact beauties that make the world worth the effort of opening your eyes. From Sarah Okafor's journal, December, Black Pine, Montana,